The station called Velith floated in the darkness of space like a tired old city. It hung above a giant planet made of gas and storms. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different worlds lived there. They bought things. They sold things. They survived however they could. Taiho was one of them. He was a human man of 32 years. He had rough hands from years of carrying cargo. His face was plain and easy to forget. He liked it that way. In a place like Velith, being forgotten meant being safe. He walked through the market that morning with no special purpose. He needed food. He needed parts for his broken ship. He needed money, but money was hard to find these days. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor as he moved past stalls selling strange fruits, weapons, and things he could not name. The market was loud. Voices called out in 20 different languages. Machines beeped and hummed. Somewhere, music played from a speaker that had seen better days. Then Taiho saw the child. She was small. Very small. Her body was covered in silver blue fur that should have been soft and shiny, but was now dirty and rough. Her eyes were huge and golden, too big for her thin face. She was a Finari. Taiho had seen her kind before. They were gentle people, peaceful. They did not fight. They did not make war. The child held a bread roll against her chest. She had stolen it. Taiho could tell from the way she was shaking, from the way her eyes kept moving, from the way she was trying to disappear into the shadows. But the shadows would not save her today. 8 figures moved through the crowd toward her. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes like black stones. Veckener. Taiho felt his stomach turn cold. Everyone in this part of space knew about the Veckener. They were mercenaries, killers, but worse than that, they were collectors. They took children of other species. They cut them open. They sold their organs to the highest bidder. Finari organs were worth a lot of money. Something about their biology made them valuable for medicine that only the rich could afford. The 8 Veckener had already drawn their knives. The blades were long and curved. They were ceremonial weapons, used for killing in a way that was slow and painful. The crowd around Taiho began to melt away. People turned their heads. They walked faster. They pretended not to see. This was how things worked on Velith. If you saw something bad, you looked away. If you heard someone scream, you covered your ears. You did not get involved. Getting involved meant dying. Taiho understood this rule. He had followed it for years. It was the only way to survive. The lead Veckener reached for the child. She screamed. It was a high, thin sound, like a small animal caught in a trap. She had nowhere to run. The wall was behind her. The killers were in front of her. Taiho's feet started, moving before his brain could stop them. He did not remember deciding to walk. He did not remember pushing through the last few people between him and the child. But suddenly he was there, standing between her and the 8 mercenaries. His heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his throat. The lead Veckener stopped. His black eyes looked at Taiho with something like confusion. Humans were not common in this part of space. They were considered weak, soft, not worth noticing. "Move," the Veckener said. His voice was like rocks grinding together. Taiho swallowed. His mouth was very dry. "She's with me?" he said. His voice came out steady, which surprised him because his hands were shaking. Behind him, he could feel the child pressing against his legs. She was so small, so scared. The Veckener laughed. It was an ugly sound, wet and clicking. The other 7 laughed too. It sounded like bones breaking. "Human," the leader said, "you have chosen death." Taiho knew this was true. He had no weapons. He had no training. He had no armor. He was just a cargo hauler with bad debts and a broken ship. Against 1 Veckener, he would have no chance. Against 8, he was already dead, but he did not move. The first knife went into his shoulder. The pain was bright and hot, like fire spreading through his body. He gasped, but stayed on his feet. The second knife took him in the side. He felt something inside him tear. Blood began to run down his leg, warm and wet. The third knife. The fourth. Each one made him weaker. Each one brought more pain than he knew was possible. By the fifth knife, he had fallen to his knees. But even then, he kept his body between the blades and the child. The little Fenari was crying now. She was saying something in her language. Taiho could not understand the words, but he understood the feeling. She was begging them to stop. She was begging him to run, but there was nowhere to run. And even if there was, Taiho would not have moved. The sixth knife. The seventh. His vision was going dark at the edges. The world was becoming far away. He could hear voices, but they sounded like they were underwater. The eighth knife went into his back. Taiho fell forward, curling his body around the child like a blanket. His blood pooled on the metal floor. It was warm at first, then cold. Everything was becoming cold. The crowd watched in silence. No one moved to help. No one called for security. On Velith, this was just another death. Just another body that would be cleaned up before the next trading cycle. But something strange happened. The Veckener had stopped. They were looking at something behind Taiho. Their black eyes had gone wide. For the first time, they looked afraid. Taiho tried to turn his head. He tried to see what they were seeing, but his body would not obey him anymore. The darkness was coming fast now. It was warm and soft, like falling asleep after a very long day. The last thing he heard was the child's voice. She was still crying. She was still holding on to his hand. Then there was nothing. Taiho died on the floor of Velith Station, with 8 knives in his body and a stranger's child in his arms. He died without knowing that he was being watched, without knowing that his death had been witnessed by eyes that had seen 10,000 years of war. Without knowing that his story was only beginning. Taiho opened his eyes and saw white light. For a moment, he thought he was still dying. Maybe this was what death looked like. A bright, empty nothing. But then he noticed that he could feel things. He could feel softness under his back. He could smell something sweet, like flowers he had never seen before. He could hear water moving somewhere nearby. Dead people did not feel things. Dead people did not smell flowers. Taiho sat up slowly. His body felt strange, light, clean. He looked down at himself and saw smooth skin where the knife wound should have been. Not scars, not bandages, just skin, as if the knives had never touched him at all. He was wearing simple white clothes that were not his own. He was lying on a bed that was softer than anything he had ever touched. The room around him was beautiful. Walls of polished gray stone. A small waterfall flowing down one corner into a pool. Windows that showed nothing but stars. This was not Velith Station. This was not anywhere Taiho had ever been. Then he saw them. 7 figures stood at the foot of his bed. They were tall and still, like statues made of shadow. They wore armor that was completely black, so dark that it seemed to eat the light around it. Their faces were hidden behind masks that had no features. No eyes, no mouth. Just smooth, curved surfaces that reflected nothing. Taiho's heart began to beat faster. He did not know who these beings were, but he could feel something coming from them. Power. Danger. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were something else entirely. "He wakes," one of them said. The voice was female. Cold and clear, like ice breaking. Taiho pushed himself up higher on the bed. His voice came out rough. "Where am I? The kid? The little girl? Where is she?" "The Fenari child is safe," the female voice said. "She has been returned to her people." No harm will come to her. Taiho let out a breath he did not know he was holding. The child was alive. That was what mattered. That was the only thing that mattered. Where am I? He asked again. The figure who'd spoken stepped forward. She reached up and removed her mask. The face beneath was not human, but it was close. Sharp features. Skin that was very pale. Silver markings ran across her cheeks and forehead like beautiful scars. Her eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds. "You are aboard the Vanguard Eternal," she said. "Flagship of the Shadow Covenant. I am Commander Yuna." Taiho stared at her. He had heard stories about the Shadow Covenant. Everyone had. They were legends, myths, the kind of things spacers talked about in bars when they were drunk. Ancient warriors who had existed for thousands of years. Soldiers so deadly that entire fleets would surrender rather than face them. Ghosts who appeared from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. Most people did not believe they were real. "That's not possible," Taiho said. "The Shadow Covenant is just a story." Another figure stepped forward and removed his mask. This one was older. A man with a hard face covered in scars. His eyes had seen things that Taiho could not imagine. Things that had happened before Taiho's grandfather was born. "I am Dowan," the man said. "First Blade of the Covenant. We are not a story. We are very real. And we have brought you here because of what you did." Taiho shook his head. "What I did? I got stabbed 8 times. I died. That's not exactly something to be proud of." "You did die," Yuna said. "For approximately 4 minutes. We brought you back. You can do that? We can do many things." Yuna's gray eyes studied him carefully. "But we did not bring you back because we could. We brought you back because we needed to understand." "Understand what?" Dowan moved closer. His scarred face was serious. "In 10,000 years, the Covenant has watched the galaxy. We have studied every species. We have learned every fighting style. We have seen courage and cowardice. We have seen wisdom and foolishness. But we have never seen what we saw on Velas Station." Taiho was confused. "I don't understand. I just stood there and got killed." "No." Yuna's voice was strange, almost soft. "You stood between 8 blade masters and a child you did not know. You had no weapons, no training, no hope of survival. The probability of your victory was 0. Not small, 0. You knew you'd die." "Yeah," Taiho said. "I knew. Then why did you do it?" The question hung in the air. Taiho looked at the 7 warriors around him. Even without their masks, their faces showed nothing. No emotion. No feeling. They were like blank pages waiting to be written on. "Because someone had to," Taiho said finally. "She was just a kid. She was alone. If I walked away, she would have died scared and alone. I couldn't let that happen." "But you died instead," Dowan said. "Yeah, but at least she didn't die alone." The warriors looked at each other. Something passed between them. Some kind of silent communication that Taiho could not read. Yuna spoke again. "We are the deadliest warriors in the known galaxy. We have trained since birth. We have given up everything, family, love, fear, hope to become perfect weapons. We serve no government. We follow no flag. We exist only to protect the balance of power in the universe." "Sounds lonely," Taiho said before he could stop himself. For a moment, he thought he saw something flicker in Yuna's gray eyes. But it was gone before he could be sure. "We have studied humans for centuries," Dowan said. "Your species confused us. You are weak. You live short lives. Your bodies break easily. By every measure, you should have been destroyed long ago. Other species would have hunted you to extinction." "Thanks for the encouragement," Taiho muttered. "But you survived. Dowan continued. You spread across the stars. You built civilizations. And again, we saw humans do what you did on Valeth, throwing themselves into death for strangers, sacrificing everything for beings they had never met. We could not understand it. Yuna leaned forward. We needed to know why. That is why you are here. That is why we saved your life. Taiho looked at these ancient warriors. These legends made flesh. They had brought him back from death. They had crossed who knows how much space to find him. All because they could not understand why a simple cargo hauler would die for a child. I'm not special, he said. Any human would have done the same thing. No, Yuna said. That is exactly what makes it special. You believe that. Truly believe it. And that is something we have never seen in any other species. Dowan placed a hand on the bed frame. His scarred fingers gripped the metal tightly. We wish to learn, he said. Teach us what it means to be human. Taiho laughed. It was a strange, tired sound. I don't even know the answer to that. Then help us find it, Yuna said. Together. Taiho looked out the window at the endless stars. Somewhere out there, a Fenari child was sleeping safe in her bed because a stranger had stood in front of some knives. It was not a complicated thing. It was not a grand philosophy, but maybe that was the point. Okay, Taiho said, but I'm going to need some food first. Dying makes you hungry. For the first time, the faintest hint of a smile crossed Dowan's scarred face. The days on the Vanguard Eternal moved slowly. Taiho learned that the ship was massive. It was bigger than some space stations he had visited. Thousands of warriors lived and trained inside its dark metal walls. They moved through the corridors like shadows, silent and focused. They also watched him. Everywhere Taiho went, he felt eyes on him. Not threatening, just curious. As if he were some strange animal they had never seen before. A young warrior named Jizu was assigned to be his guide. She was younger than the others, maybe 20 years old by human counting, though Taiho was not sure how age worked for the Covenant. She had dark hair cut short and eyes that never stopped moving. She was always watching, always thinking. This is the training hall, Jizu said, stopping in front of a massive doorway. Warriors practice here for 12 hours every day. Taiho looked inside. The hall was enormous. Hundreds of warriors were fighting in pairs. They moved faster than his eyes could follow. Their weapons flashed like lightning. The sound of metal hitting metal filled the air like thunder. 12 hours? Taiho asked. Every day? Yes, we have trained this way since childhood. By the time we reach full status, we've spent more than 50,000 hours in combat practice. Taiho whistled softly. And I thought my job was hard. Jizu tilted her head. It was a gesture he had seen her make before. It meant she was confused. Your job is carrying cargo. That is not difficult. It is when your ship keeps breaking down and you can't afford to fix it. Then why do you continue? Because it's the only thing I know how to do. Jizu considered this. She seemed to consider everything. Her brain was always working, always trying to understand. I have questions, she said. The commander says I am allowed to ask you questions. Go ahead. They walked together through the corridors. The ship hummed softly around them. Other warriors passed by, giving small nods to Jizu, but saying nothing. On the station, Jizu began, when you stood in front of the child, what did you feel? Taiho thought about it. The memory was still sharp. The fear, the pain, the strange calm that had come over him in those last moments. Scared, he said finally. Really, really scared. But you did not run. No, why not? Taiho stopped walking. He leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. Have you ever seen something really wrong happening? Something that you knew was bad, deep in your bones? Jisoo nodded slowly. I have seen many things in battle. And what did you do? I followed orders. I completed my mission. But what did you feel? Jisoo was quiet for a long moment. Her face was blank, but something moved behind her eyes. Something she was trying hard to hide. We are trained not to feel, she said carefully. Feelings are weakness. They make you slow. They make you make mistakes. That sounds lonely. It is efficient. Taiho shook his head. It's not the same thing. They continued walking. Jisoo led him to an observation deck. One wall was made entirely of glass, showing the vast darkness of space. Stars burned in the distance like tiny fires that would never go out. I have another question, Jisoo said. She sat down on a bench and looked out at the stars. Taiho sat beside her. Ask. When you were dying, you held the child. You curled your body around her. You used yourself as a shield. Jisoo turned to look at him. Her eyes were serious. Why did you protect her face? Taiho blinked. He had not thought about this. I don't know. I didn't want her to see it. The knives. The blood. I didn't want that to be the last thing she saw. But you were dying. Yeah. And in your final moments, you thought about what she would see. Not about your own pain. Not about your own death. You thought about her. Taiho shrugged. I guess so. Jisoo stared at him for a long time. Her face was still blank, but her hands were gripping her knees very tightly. I do not understand, she said quietly. I have killed many enemies. I have completed many missions. I have never once thought about what they felt. I was trained to see them as targets, as problems to be solved, not as people. That's because someone taught you not to feel, Taiho said. But feeling is still there. It doesn't go away just because you ignore it. How do you know? Because you're asking me these questions. If you really didn't care, you wouldn't want to understand. Jisoo turned away. She looked out at the stars again. When she spoke, her voice was very small. Sometimes I dream about the faces, the ones I have killed. They look at me and they ask why. I never have an answer. Taiho did not know what to say. He wanted to comfort her, but he did not know how. She was a killer, a weapon trained from birth. But she was also just a young woman carrying a weight that was too heavy for anyone to carry alone. Maybe that's okay, he said finally. Maybe not having an answer means you're still human. Or whatever you are. Maybe it means you haven't lost everything yet. Jisoo looked at him. A single tear ran down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, as if it embarrassed her. I have not cried since I was a child, she said. I thought I had forgotten how. You didn't forget. You just buried it deep. It's still there. They sat in silence for a while. The stars drifted past the window. Somewhere in the ship, warriors were training, fighting, becoming sharper and deadlier. But here, in this quiet room, something different was happening. I will not tell anyone about this, Jisoo said. About the tear. It would be seen as weakness. Your secret is safe with me. Jisoo stood up. She straightened her armor and put her blank mask back on. But before she walked away, she stopped. Thank you, she said, for talking to me. Anytime. Jisoo left. Taiho stayed on the bench, looking out at the endless darkness. He did not know what he was doing here. He did not know how to teach anyone anything. He was just a cargo hauler who had made a stupid decision and gotten himself killed. But maybe that was enough. Maybe being human was not about knowing answers. Maybe it was just about asking questions and being brave enough to feel the weight of them. The stars burned on. The ship flew through the void. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the deadliest warriors in the galaxy, something was beginning to change. 2 days later, Jizu brought the entire Covenant Council to speak with Taiho. She did not explain why. She did not need to. The questions were only beginning. The council chamber was a perfect circle. Seats rose in tiers around a central platform, like the inside of a bowl. The walls were made of dark metal that seemed to swallow sound. Everything about this room was designed to make whoever stood in the middle feel small and alone. Taiho stood in the middle. 12 figures sat in the highest tier. They wore the same black armor as all the other warriors, but their masks were different. More complex. More ancient. These were the leaders of the Shadow Covenant. The ones who made decisions that could change the fate of entire civilizations. Commander Yuna stood at Taiho's side. She had removed her mask. Dohwan sat among the council, his scarred face watching without expression. Jisoo stood near the door, her hands clasped behind her back. The eldest of the council spoke first. He was called Awoke. His voice was rough with age, like stones rubbing together. Human, you have been among us for many weeks. You have been watched. You have been questioned. You have been studied. Taiho waited. He expected to hear that he would be killed, or that his memory would be erased and he would be sent home with no knowledge of this place. The Covenant did not allow outsiders to know their secrets. Everyone in the galaxy knew that. We have reached a decision, Awoke continued. Here it comes, Taiho thought. This is where they tell me I'm going to disappear. We wish to offer you a place among us. Taiho blinked. He was sure he had heard wrong. I'm sorry, what? Not as a warrior, Yuna said quickly. You do not have the training. You do not have the physical ability. To be honest, you do not have the coordination. Thanks for that. But what you have, Yuna continued, is something we do not. Something we did not know we were missing until we watched you die on Velith Station. Doan rose from his seat. His old body moved slowly, but there was still power in every step. He walked down to the central platform and stood before Taiho. For 10,000 years, Doan said, we have trained ourselves to remove emotion. We cut out fear because fear makes you slow. We cut out love because love makes you weak. We cut out hope because hope makes you take stupid risks. He paused. We cut out everything that makes a person. A person. It made us powerful, Awoke said from above. We became the greatest warriors the galaxy has ever seen. Armies flee when they hear our name. Emperors pay any price to have us on their side. But we lost something, Dohan said. His voice dropped lower. We became hollow, empty. We fight, we kill, we complete our missions. But we do not remember why. We do not remember what we are fighting for. Taiho looked around the chamber. These were the most dangerous beings in the known universe. They could destroy fleets with a thought. They could topple governments in a single night. They had power that most people could not even imagine, and they were looking at him like he had something they needed. I don't understand, Taiho said. You want me to teach you how to feel? We want you to teach us what you did on Velith, Yuna said. You threw yourself in front of knives for a child you had never met. You did not calculate the odds. You did not think about the outcome. You just acted, because it was the right thing to do. Yes. Yuna's gray eyes were intense. But we do not know what that means. We calculate outcomes. We measure costs and benefits. We make optimal decisions. But right is not a number. Right is not a calculation. It is something else. Something we have forgotten how to understand. Awoke leaned forward in his seat. We have a word for what you did. Compassion. We know the definition. We can explain it in any language. But we cannot feel it. It is like describing the color blue to someone who has never seen. Taiho thought about this for a long moment. He thought about his life before Velith. The cargo runs. The broken ship. The endless struggle just to survive. He had never thought of himself as special. He was just a man trying to get by. But maybe that was the point. Maybe being human was not about being special. It was about being ordinary and choosing to do something extraordinary anyway. Okay, Taiho said. But I have conditions. The council stirred. No one made demands of the Shadow Covenant. But Hayok raised a hand for silence. Speak. First, I want the Fenari child brought here. Her name is Mira. I want to see her. I want to make sure she's really okay. That can be arranged, Yuna said. Second, I want you to understand something. I can't teach you compassion like you teach fighting. It's not a skill. It's not a technique. It's a choice you make every day. Sometimes you'll fail. Sometimes you'll forget. That has to be okay. Dowan nodded slowly. We understand. Third, Taiho paused. This was the hard one. You have to let me see your faces. All of you. No masks. Compassion starts with seeing each other as people. Not as soldiers or weapons or titles. People. The chamber went very quiet. The masks were sacred to the Covenant. They represented the death of the self, the surrender of identity to a greater purpose. No outsider had ever seen beneath them. Hayok stood. He was very old. His joints cracked as he moved. Slowly, he reached up and removed his mask. His face was lined with age. His eyes were tired. But there was something there that Taiho had not expected to see. Something that looked almost like hope. One by one, the other council members removed their masks. Yuna had already shown her face, but she stood taller now, as if a weight had been lifted. Dohan's scars caught the light. And there were others young and old, male and female, all of them looking at Taiho with the same strange hunger. They wanted to learn. They wanted to remember what they had lost. Okay, Taiho said softly. Then let's begin. The first lesson was simple. Taiho asked each warrior to tell him one thing they remembered from before their training. One memory from childhood. One moment when they had felt something other than duty. At first, no one spoke. The silence stretched on and on. These were people who had spent their entire lives learning to forget. Then Jesu stepped forward. She stood before the council, her young face pale but determined. I remember my mother, she said. Her voice shook slightly. She had a garden. She grew flowers that smelled like sunshine. Before I was taken for training, she gave me one of the flowers. She told me to keep it in my heart, even when they tried to take it away. Tears ran down her face. She did not wipe them away. I kept it, she whispered. All these years. I thought I had lost it, but I kept it. The chamber was silent. But it was not an empty silence. It was full of something. Something that had not been there before. Slowly, one by one, the other warriors began to speak. They shared memories. They shared pain. They shared small, precious moments that they had buried so deep they thought they were gone forever. And Taiho listened. That was all he did. He listened. It was not much. It was just the beginning. But as he looked around the chamber at the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy, watching them remember how to be human, Taiho understood something. Maybe being weak was the strongest thing of all. 6 months passed like water flowing downhill. Slow at first, then faster and faster. Taiho had become part of the Vanguard Eternal in ways he never expected. He ate with the warriors. He walked with them through the endless corridors. He listened to their stories and told them his own. The cargo hauler from Velith Station had become something else. Something he did not have a name for. The Fenari child, Mira, had been brought to the ship as promised. She was healthy now. Her silver blue fur was soft and shining again. Her golden eyes were full of life. She followed Taiho everywhere, Holding onto his hand like he might disappear if she let go. She called him the one who stood. In her language, it was a title of great honor. Taiho did not feel like he deserved it, but he did not tell her that the warriors had changed too. It was small at first. A smile here. A kind word there. Jisoo had started growing flowers in a small pot in her room. Dohan had begun telling jokes during training, bad jokes, but jokes nonetheless. Even Commander Yuna had softened. She laughed sometimes now. It was a strange sound, like she was relearning how to make it. But the true test was coming. Taiho could feel it in the air. The way the warriors moved with new purpose. The way they looked at each other differently. Something was building toward a moment that would change everything. That moment came on a cold morning in deep space. The Vanguard Eternal dropped out of faster than light. Travel at the edge of Fenari territory. Taiho was on the bridge with Yuna and Dowan when the alerts began to flash. What's happening? Taiho asked. Yuna's face had gone hard. The old coldness was back in her eyes, but there was something new underneath it. A refugee convoy. 300 ships carrying Fenari families fleeing a war. The view screen lit up with images. Taiho saw the convoy, hundreds of small ships, old and fragile. They were surrounded by a mercenary fleet. 50 warships, bristling with weapons. The mercenaries were moving into attack formation. Who are they? Taiho asked. Raiders, Dowan said grimly. Paid by a rival faction to make sure no survivors reach safety. They will kill everyone. Men, women, children. They have done it before. Taiho's hands clenched into fists. Then we stopped them. Yuna shook her head. We cannot. The Shadow Covenant has a policy of non-intervention in regional conflicts. It has been our doctrine for 10,000 years. We do not take sides. We do not interfere unless the balance of the entire galaxy is at stake. But there are children on those ships. Taiho pointed at the screen. Families. They're going to die. I know. Yuna's voice was tight. But the doctrine is clear. If we break it once, we break it forever. We become just another weapon for whoever has the most power. The mercenary fleet opened fire. Even from this distance, Taiho could see the flashes of explosions. One of the refugee ships had been hit. It was spinning now, fire pouring from its side. On the bridge, the warriors watched in silence. Their faces were masks again, but their eyes told a different story. Jisoo was crying openly. Others had their hands on their weapons, gripping so tightly that their knuckles were white. Myra pressed against Taiho's leg. She was watching the screen with her huge golden eyes. Those are my people, she whispered. They are burning. Taiho looked at Yuna. Policies are just words. What do you want to do? The question hung in the air. Another ship exploded on the screen. The screams were being broadcast on open channels. Mothers calling for their children. Children calling for their mothers. Yuna's jaw tightened. Her gray eyes were wet. I want to save them, she whispered. Then do it. Yuna turned to face the bridge crew. Every warrior was looking at her, waiting. For 10,000 years, the Covenant had followed the doctrine without question. But something had changed in the past 6 months. Something had broken open inside them. Signal the fleet, Yuna said. Her voice was steady now, strong. All ships to combat formation. We are intervening. No one questioned her. No one hesitated. The Vanguard Eternal moved forward like a dark arrow, and 7 other Covenant vessels fell into formation behind it. The mercenaries saw them coming. They had 4 seconds to realize what they were facing. 4 seconds to understand that the legends were real, that the shadows had come for them. Then the Covenant opened fire. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Taiho watched from the bridge as the most powerful warriors in the galaxy did what they had been trained to do. But this time, They were not doing it for money or politics or power. They were doing it because it was right. Every mercenary ship was destroyed. Not one refugee vessel was lost after the Covenant arrived. When it was over, the darkness of space was filled with debris and silence. Then the communications came flooding in. Hundreds of voices, speaking in languages Taiho did not understand. But he understood the feeling: gratitude, relief, joy, the sound of people who have been saved from death. Among the voices, one image appeared on the screen. A young Fenari child with silver blue fur, standing at a viewport on one of the refugee ships. She was waving at the Covenant vessels with both hands, her face bright with a smile. Myra gasped and pressed closer to the screen. "I know her," she said. "That is Bora. She is my friend from before." Taiho smiled. Yuna stood beside him, watching the celebrations on the screen. Her mask lay on the floor where she had dropped it. She made no move to pick it up. "What have you done to us?" she asked softly. But she was smiling too. "Nothing," Taiho said. "You were always capable of this. I just reminded you why it matters." Later, when the convoy had been escorted to safety and the fleet had returned to normal operations, the council gathered one last time. But this time, there were no masks. There were no cold faces or empty eyes. There were just people, looking at each other with something like wonder. Hayok spoke first. His old voice was warm now. "What happened today will be remembered forever. We broke our oldest law. We became something new. Something better," Jisoo added quietly. "Perhaps." Hayok looked at Taiho. "The human taught us something we had forgotten. That strength is not just about what we can destroy. It is about what we choose to protect." Dawan stood up. His scarred face was peaceful in a way Taiho had never seen before. "We will not abandon our discipline. We will still be warriors. But we will also be guardians. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. Not because it is strategic, because it is right." The council agreed. A new doctrine was added to the ancient texts of the Covenant. It was written in simple words, attributed to an unremarkable human cargo hauler who had died 8 times over for a child he had never met. The measure of strength is not in what we can destroy, but in what we choose to protect, even when the calculation says we will lose. Especially then, Taiho lived among the Covenant for many years after that. He never became a warrior. He remained soft and fragile by their standards. His hair turned gray. His steps became slow. But he was family. He was loved. Myra grew up strong and wise. She returned to her people and became a leader among them. She told stories about the human who had stood in front of knives for a stranger's child. Those stories spread across the stars. When Taiho finally died of old age, surrounded by warriors who had become his family and a Fenari woman who had become his daughter, the Shadow Covenant mourned for 7 days. On the 8th day, they returned to the stars, not as shadows, not as cold, perfect weapons, as guardians, because one human had taught them that the universe was worth dying for, and more importantly, worth living for. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, a little girl with silver blue fur watched the Covenant ships fly past. She was old now, with children and grandchildren of her own. But she still remembered the man who had saved her, the man who had taught an empire of warriors how to feel. She pressed her hand against the window and smiled. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing." And in the endless darkness of space, it almost seemed like the stars burned a little brighter in response.